Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is Friday, the last day of our podcast for the week. We're finishing up the book of Esther. We're looking at Esther chapter 6. It says, that night the king had trouble sleeping, so he ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign so it could be read to him. In those days, he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bigthana, sounds like a wrestler to me, and Teresh.
The Minions.
The Minions. Bob and Bob's the only minion name I can remember. Two of the eunuchs who guarded the door to the king's private quarters, they had plotted to assassinate Xerxes. What reward or recognition did we ever give Mordecai for this? The king asked. His attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. And it says, who is that at the outer court? The king inquired. As it happened, Haman had just arrived at the outer court, in the outer court of the palace, to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole he had prepared. So what happens is, in the middle of the night, and this is a God timing thing, you know.
I think we're seeing the results of the prayer and fasting.
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah. And the results of the prayer and fasting are more than just the people are saved. The Jewish people go from being saved and Esther hidden to being elevated to places of prominence. So she then is known as a Jewish woman. Mordecai gets elevated to a place of prominence because what he's done. But what he did happened, we don't know how long ago, but a long time ago, long enough that he had forgotten. Xerxes had forgotten. And he only finds it when they're reading him his bedtime stories. I don't know any other way to describe
Which I'm guessing those had to have been kind of boring if they were meant to put him back to sleep.
Right, yeah. And so he remembers and he asks, so the way it works is he asks, have we done anything for him? They say no. Haman's outside coming in to ask for this very person to be impaled. And the king says, what can we do for somebody who we want to honor? And Haman thinks he's talking about him. So he goes all out, I think he says, put me on a horse and let me ride down the middle of the street and everybody bow down to me.
And why was Haman coming in the middle of the night?
Yeah, that's weird too.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was waiting on his appointment the next morning. Who knows?
He was probably up plotting something.
Yeah. This is a case where somebody's been plotting something bad and bad happens to them. And where someone has done good a long time before and they finally are rewarded. So the kind of question I want to have today is, how can we be sure that we'll be rewarded for the good things we've done or the bad things? How can we know for certain that at some point this is going to play out in our favor or against us?
I know scripturally it says that we will be rewarded for these things, but what we have to remember is we may not be rewarded for them here, and the reward that we get may not be what we would be expecting. I mean, the reward might be long and prosperous life. It might be good relationships with your kids, or your kids having healthy marriages down the road, or different things like that, reconciled relationships in your life. It may not be some sort of big public declaration or something that you can walk around and wear or spend.
I mean, I think that the most clear way we see this working out is if you start to Haman, he was not a good guy, and he found out that what would happen. So when you start treating people bad, eventually you're going to have enough people mad at you where you're going to get in trouble. You're going to have your comeuppance. And so, and when you treat people good, then there are people that will stick up for you that, oh man, I remember when I was going through this and they did that for me, I'm going to do that for them. So I think there is the eternal portion, but then there is also when you treat people good, people want to treat you good too.
I think that when we're the person doing right, we want our reward immediately. When we're the person doing wrong, we hope bad never happens to us.
We get that mercy.
Right. And the opposite is true on the other side. When somebody else is doing us wrong, we want them to suffer immediately. And you know, there's a Bible verse that says, "Be sure your sins will find you out."
I would love quoting that verse at people.
Huh?
I would love quoting that, like when I was younger.
While doing this.
Was that some of your self-righteousness?
Yes. Yes.
But I have found in my life that the rewards of good, I don't want to say this. The rewards of good are often built up over a period of time. You know, they're often the result of a long-term doing the right thing. You know, the results of bad are not always the same. Sometimes you can do something bad and immediately there's a consequence to it, you know. But other times there are unwise choices that we make over a period of time that later down the road have an impact. So like one of those choices are health choices. You know, there are things that you can do that are detrimental to your health when you're younger, and you may survive for a little while, but eventually, you know, it comes back to haunt you. Like you made this, that you abused your body. And, you know, I see this on a regular basis. You know, this happens to people that if you do X, it may take a while for it to come to pass, but it's going to show up. You know, and I do think there are promises in Scripture where we get rewarded. So as we are recording this, we're actually reading, our church is reading in 2 Kings. And I believe yesterday in the reading would have been the Shunammite woman that built the apartment, prophet's quarters for Elisha. Was she from Shunem as well? I know there's a Shunammite woman story, but
I don't know how words sound out loud. I can only look at them and know.
Yeah, I believe I'm right. But anyway, the woman builds the prophet's quarters, you know, and that's an interesting thing. That's a popular terminology. Like I know there's this ministry a couple of hours from here south in a town called Richlands, and they have converted an old hotel into what they call prophet's quarters. And it is for preachers to come and stay and take time away and off. You know, they're like small efficiency apartments, and they let them, if they're coming to preach at a local church, they let them stay there. And that's what it's called. It's called the prophet's quarters. So that, you know, it's one of those things that played into our vernacular. She got repaid though in a kid. Like she didn't do it to get a kid, you know, but she did it. And he says, you're going to have a child. And I think that sometimes we do good things wanting X return. And God gives us something completely different because he knows what we need. And, you know, because I'll hear people say, you know, if the TV preachers are famous, if you give this amount of money, you're going to be debt free. Well, you're not going to be debt free if you don't stop spending money. That's the first answer to that question. But that may not be how God rewards it. You know, that just may not be how it works out. And I think that's a real tension for some people in their lives is they want to do A and get B. And God's got 24 other letters of the alphabet, you know, to choose from, that it may not be that. And have you acted or done something in a way that God rewarded you, and it may have taken a while, or maybe it was an immediate reward? I have one, and I almost hate sharing it at times because it makes people uncomfortable, like what the scenario. But I have zero doubts about it to this day. Like, this is what happened. So, Barbara and I was going to teach in Germany, and we were taking a couple from the church with us. We would try to do that occasionally, take somebody from the church with us to have that experience. And we were taking them with us to Germany. Well, in between the planning of that trip and the execution of that trip, we were at a conference, and we met Oleg Rutke, who was our who we support now. He does the transition homes, helps fight human trafficking, and he was in Moldova. And so I told Barbara, I said, while we're in Europe, we should go over and see what they're doing. Like, we can fly over for a day, spend the night, fly home the next day, or fly back to Germany the next day, and do what we need to do. And so I bought the tickets for the four of us to fly from Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, to Moldova and back. Was $5,500 and some change, which was a stupid amount of money for that short flight, because it was a really short flight. It was just a stupid amount of money. And it, at that time, like, was a bank breaker for me. This would have been like 2011, 12, somewhere in that range. Well, the way it worked out, we were going to Moldova, but before that, we had planned a trip with Jay and Sonia to Las Vegas. Jay wanted to go to Las Vegas and see. What are you laughing at?
Have you heard me? Where this is going.
Have you heard me tell this story?
I think I might.
It makes me uncomfortable to tell it on a podcast, but I'm going to tell it. So we went with Jay and Sonia to Las Vegas. They wanted to see Vegas, and we took them out there and showed them around. And I'm a gambler at heart. I would risk my last dollar to get to. And honest before God, I sat down at a blackjack table and I won $5,514. And I got up and I put the money in an envelope. I gave it to Jay. I said, "You need to take this back home."
You didn't trust yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Under no circumstances.
You're like, I could turn this 55.
That's right. Into
10.
55,000. Yeah, that's my nature, And I said, "I want you to take this home." And I've told him this story. I talked about it to him then. I said, to the dollar, this is how much I spent on plane tickets for this trip to go over here and check out this mission. And I paid for it out of my own pocket. The church wasn't paying for it, so it was my own personal expense. And to this day, I believe the Lord provided that money. Now, I've lost my share of money in a casino before, and I've won money. But that moment, it was like to the dollar what I had spent, and that makes people uncomfortable. But what I know is, and most of God's blessings that I get back into my life are not always dollar for dollar. And they're not even, it's not always I give $1 and I get money back. Often it's other situations that work out. But I think sometimes it's almost like the prophet rejecting the raven that brought him food. He's like, "No, I'm not eating that. That's unclean." But it was God's provision. And in that moment, there's never been any other time around gambling that I would say God was involved. I just believe he was involved at that moment.
I mean, he can easily bless us and give those provisions to us in very unconventional ways. I mean, it's how we respond to it and us recognizing what he's doing with it. It would have been a different thing if you would have received that, realized it, and been like, "Oh, I can triple this."
So that's why I gave it to Jay.
Passing it off to Jay was a very wise choice.
I knew he won't go and gamble. Yeah.
I mean, there's been times, like when I left my previous career and went into ministry, I mean, it was about a 33% pay cut for me to go into, which obviously I wasn't going to ministry for money, but
well, Finn, you should have told me that before you came here.
Well, yeah. God provided.
I didn't mean to make you stutter.
Okay, we're after renegotiating now. No, and I didn't go into it for money. Never would. But God provided for Jenny and I in numerous ways. Eventually, he ended up giving her a job while we were there that we were in a far better financial situation than I was before in my last career. And, the money was good there and everything, but he provided that way. And then some very unconventional ways with random checks that came in from overpaid insurance and some tax stuff that came back in that we weren't expecting, didn't know anything about, but it just all of a sudden started showing up. We also have some stories of that when we both committed to being full tithers and stuff like that, that we weren't doing it for any other reasons, but there were little rewards, just like a parent would give to a child, being like, hey, I'm noticing what you're doing here. I want to bless you with this.
That's right.
I don't think I can beat the Vegas story. So I'm just,
yeah.
I
well,
mean,
but that's the funny thing. So I'm pretty transparent, and I don't mind telling stories like that. But there are some people who are going to have a problem with that'll hear this podcast. They will judge me because of it, and there'll be other people who say that's not possible. I know some preachers who swear that if somebody in their church won the lottery and paid tithes on it, they wouldn't take it. I ain't one of them. I ain't one of those preachers. We're going to pray over it and sanctify it, and then we're going to use it for the Lord. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, but I think back to non-monetarily, Tyler and I spent, all the years are blurry in some ways, but 2 years, I want to say, working at an art gallery ministry where I think we deeply affected a few people, but the reach was not broad. It was not what we thought it could turn into, and tons of reasons for that. But I think God rewards that faithfulness, and now we're here, and we're both able to be involved in ministry in different ways. And sometimes it takes that time of, when Tyler started the Bible study here, which has turned into Wednesday nights, which now is a pretty good draw. I remember sitting in the lobby with one other person and listening to that Bible study for a few weeks because it was just hard to get it started up. But we had preached Sunday morning, quote unquote, sermons in an art gallery where it was the 3 people on staff. So
right.
We had that resilience, and I think that what we tried to do there, we learned a lot, and it was able to pay off.
Well, I would say very possibly the things that you learned in that process are the most valuable things, that the rewards that you would have gotten that you wouldn't have gotten any other way, that if you hadn't been there. Well, thank you for joining us this week and today, and I hope you'll be back with us on Monday as we continue our conversation in one single story.